Welcome to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik, a podcast about the stories that connect us.
3, 2, 1, and we're live. Hi, I'm Erik Grove. I'm a writer, and this is my friend Cylia. She's a reader.
And our guest today on Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik is Elizabeth Bear. Bear is an author, but she's also won awards. Let's see. It's the Hugo, the Sturgeon, the Locust, the Astounding. I'm probably leaving something out. Novels, short stories, a collaborative online social media at the time, intersectional fictional storytelling, and a fan cast yourself that was Hugo Award winning. So incredible depth of work. And also I met you through LiveJournal itself, initially at least. And Erik, as a writer, has met you through various writing interfaces. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. This is super exciting, and I'm very flattered to be sort of in at the ground floor. I did find out that apparently I am the most nominated author for the Galactic Spectrum Awards. I found that out last week. So I even won one once.
I mean, that's a byline for a business card, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
So one of the first questions we like to start people with, and this is something I've been asking people for years, is what's in your book DNA? And that could be like, what's the first story that like created the structure of Bear that whether explicitly or implicitly ends up influencing how you approach stories or how you approach the world?
I mean, it's a combination of things, you know. I very early on I was obsessed with Richard Adams' Watership Down, and that was a very formative book for me. I read it at a wildly inappropriately young age. And I read Peter Beagle's. Sorry. Oh, okay. Picking up a weird bit of feedback, but it's only in my headset, I think. So
that might be our fourth guest, the fourth guest, the ghosts. That
okay. So we can edit this part out. Peter S. Beagle's. The Last Unicorn, which was a very formative book for me. But also I read just everything I could get my hands on. I grew up as the daughter of a mom who was an avid science fiction reader, and she was a very big fan of all of the new wave, Samuel Delaney, Joanna Russ, Joe Clayton, you know, getting all of that again at a wildly inappropriately young age. I'm what happens.
Like, where's the age?
Oh, like first, second grade. Yeah. Probably a little early to be reading Joanna Russ and Chip Delaney, but you know, I turned out fine. Maybe. And I was a very big fan of Roger Zelazny, and so all of that just kind of got baked in, along with, yeah, you know, all and the usual 1970s children's / young adult books like the Walter Farley's Black Stallion books and Nancy Drew and, you know, the Three Investigators, all stuff. I just read everything I could get my hands on.
Omnivorous,
yes.
Mm-hmm. Was there something specific about the science fiction and fantasy stuff that appealed to you more, or did that happen later?
I mean, I have always preferred the as a reader, um, I really in general fixated on science fiction, fantasy, and mystery and thrillers are the places where I certainly read a fair amount of literary fiction. I make occasional forays into romance and horror. Um, I read, some. I studied English critical theory and anthropology in college, and so I read an awful lot of very worthy English, Irish, and American literature. Um, and so that it all goes into the melting pot, you know. But for me, when I come up with stories, they almost always have some kind of speculative element. Unless I'm writing like a straight mystery, which I have done, although I have not managed to sell one yet.
I mean, that's interesting that that was your undergrad work, because a lot of times speculative fiction is seen in a certain lens in some literature programs. Did you feel like you had to fight against that? Did you ended up like stepping away from speculative for a while and then coming back after your degree, or were you consistent and you were able to just not have to navigate through that kind of cultural piece of it?
So I mean, fortunate. I actually never finished my degree, which is a long story. Um, but I was a while I was in college, I was a member of. I went to the University of Connecticut, uh, and I was a member of the Yukon Science Fiction Society. Um, and before that, in high school, I was the founding president of my high school's RPG club, which, as far as I know, is still going strong. Uh,
My heart is
um,
like singing right now. I love this.
I'm kind of a nerd, baked in the bone nerd. Um, so we were fortunate that there was a professor, Dr. Roberts, at UConn at that time, who was a very big proponent of genre fiction. Uh, and he was our faculty advisor for the Science Fiction Society. He taught classes on the graphic novel, on science fiction, on genre fiction in general. Uh, and so we sort of had that, me and my group of friends, my little nerd cluster, shout out. Um, so we kind of had that association. The curriculum that I was reading in was definitely very heavily, uh, Irish literature, the English literature, American literature, and the usual tranches of romantic, Victorian, modern, um, and also I wound up reading a fair amount of comparative lit, either basically colonial English literature and or um, in translation, literature in translation.
Do
So
you
there,
find
but
those?
it would.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
go
no,
ahead.
keep going.
I was going to say, but basically, the vast majority of that was uh, mimetic fiction as opposed to fantastic fiction. Although there was a certain amount of uh, things in the mode of, I guess, magic realism sort of baked in. Uh, some New Zealand authors. It was pretty decently wide ranging for the late '80s, early '90s.
Do you find that some of those bones are I'm sure when you're in the midst, it's maybe not as apparent, but when you look back at some of the different arcs of your series, do you see the bones of any of those works that particularly jump out, or is it just kind of homogenized into the underlying structure?
I mean, there are definitely certain things that, as a reader, that I love, that also as a writer, I really find I get a lot of satisfaction out of. Um, the the moment of ethical crisis is something that I really enjoy playing around with. Um, and I feel like that moment uh, of decision, of catharsis, of where the protagonist either has to make some kind of a sacrifice or take some sort of an action that carries a lot of risk, um, or sort of fail the test, is absolute catnip for me, both as a reader and a writer.
I'm looking over the list of the different series you have, and I'm like, yep, it's there, it's there, it's there. Yep. I think the first books of yours I read was Blood and Iron out of the Promethean Age. I'm like, yep, it was there.
Yeah.
Jenny Casey, of course. It's like, I think she goes through 3 or 4 crises per book.
Oh yeah.
Or like, look, I'm in for it.
Somebody or another said that New England writers, which I am, for my sins, tend to write comedies of ethics, and I think that that's probably very true. So, going all the way back to Hawthorne, it's just kind of part of the literary DNA
Of Calvinism, if nothing else.
of Calvinism. Yeah, exactly.
I I think one of the things that inspired me the most to want to become a writer was the cabal of New England authors from like various points in American history, where you would sort of get that sense that they would all just kind of bump into each other and have opinions. I always loved that. I always loved that vibe of when you pick up a book off of the shelf, you don't necessarily know the greater context, but when you read like Hemingway, and then you know that like he was constantly busting Fitzgerald's chops, or like they kind of got along and didn't get along, and they would like do the equivalent of like flame wars on the internet now, and their various essay collections or like interviews, and I'm wondering if it's part of that New England like community author tradition that lends itself to that sort of storyline, or if there's something like in the water. What are you guys drinking in Massachusetts?
So did you know? Well, this is Connecticut rather than Massachusetts. But did you know that Harriet Beecher Stowe and Mark Twain were literally next door neighbors?
And that's the stuff that just for me like makes my imagination and my heart explode.
And their houses are both museums now, and you can go visit them. Apparently, they used to yell out the back door to each other.
My wife has been bugging me for years because she knows that this is something that both of us would be interested in. She's like, we have to go, and we have to go to like all of the author houses in New England. And we just haven't coordinated like a vacation schedule to do it. But it's stuff like that where you read a book and you think like, this book is great, but then when you appreciate the people involved in the book were inspired by each other, or maybe like criticizing each other without you necessarily being aware of it. That's where, like, for me, my creative, like, the part of my creative brain that also wants community gets engaged. Like that inextricability between, like, the complexity of story and the complexity of community and the way that they give and take. I think that is part of our inspiration for this podcast, even.
Yeah. And I think it's absolutely, I think it's baked into how creativity works. It's, if you look at like any outflowing of creative passion and innovation, as far as we know it, at any point through the through the history of the arts as far back as we know, there are these clusters of people who were hanging around with each other and kind of pushing each other to work harder and do more and be more creative and stealing techniques from each other. So you look at the flowering of the English, early modern English theater, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
got Thomas Nash and Christopher Marlowe and William Shakespeare and Ben Jonson and all these other dudes just kind of like shooting stuff back and forth, riffing on each other. Marlowe going, fine, I'm going to write a Shakespeare play. Shakespeare going, fine, I'm going to write a Marlowe play. You think that was buckets of blood? Here's buckets of blood. um, anything you can do, I can do better, but also kind of like playful and the Algonquin Round Table.
Yeah.
The 1970s, 1980s music scene in Minneapolis and New York City. Just all of that, people playing, bouncing off each other is where we have this cultural idea of the artist in the ivory tower doing their thing unaffected by anyone else. And I don't know if there's really anybody who works that way. I mean, there must be some people, but I was about to say I've never met one, but then I wouldn't have, would I?
There is the irony.
But I do think in speculative fiction, particularly, it's often in conversation with each other. And the one that makes me think about it is your, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Iskrin series, the first one, A Companion to Wolves, that you wrote with Sarah Monet. And I remember you posting at the time that it was basically in conversation in some way in critique with Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern series, which, full disclosure, she's my girl. Like, I'm here for the fire lizards. That's what got me into speculative fiction. So I
love those books so much as a kid. I just absolutely love those books. And in conversation and in critique of sort of companion animal fantasy in general, because I also grew up on Jennifer Robison's Chronicles of the Chesuli, which I am probably mispronouncing, and other similar books, which then sort of,
Mercedes Lackey, the Valdemar,
right? Yeah, which through and C.J. Cherryh was riffing on this stuff back in the 80s with the Morgaine books, Exile's Gate and so forth, with the, like, I'm going to deconstruct companion animal fantasy by making the companion animals terrifying. And then there was, oh my God, Sherry Tepper, Grass, right? Which is another deconstruction of the companion animal fantasy, in which the companion animals are terrifying and it becomes a horror novel. So yeah, we're all always in conversation with each other. That's just how it works. And every genre has those books that are in conversation with each other and build on each other. And so if you look in science fiction, one of the, there's like this clear lineage, for example, from you can pick any book and like trace a lineage back. I was on, speaking of writer communities, I was on Blue Sky a couple of weeks ago talking with somebody or another about I think this may have been in John Scalzi's comments, actually, like the history of, like military science fiction and the lineage of the John Scalzi military science fiction novel, going back through the Forever War and Bill the Galactic Hero and Heinlein and, so forth back into, and the Lensman novels, and just this whole list of histories.
Well, like how Honor Harrington series was basically a pastiche of the Horatio Hornblower.
Exactly. Yeah. And in some ways, so is Star Trek. Uh, you know, it very much was kind of pitched. The original series was kind of pitched as First Day New Tongue, Horatio Hornblower in space, right? Or Wagon Train to the Stars. I think that was the other. So if we think that coming up with elaborate comps is a modern phenomenon, it's not. Elaborate and slightly bullshit comps.
I love that lineage, right? Like that's one of the appeals of diving in diving into the genre, or to like a and that sense of community. At the same time, I did not read as much speculative fiction. Even just saying speculative fiction makes me like an imposter. I didn't read as much science fiction or fantasy when I was a teen. I read a little bit when I was younger, and then I had the literary fiction deprogramming and then return period that some people have experienced. But so I read a little bit like for younger readers, and then I drifted away, and then when I came back, and one of the things that I find is that it can be sometimes intimidating to be able to, like, I just want to read one book. I don't want to read this book plus the 20 books that this one is in conversation with, and understand that. I mean, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's a super cool idea. And I'm reminded of, like, I was a giant comic book reader when I was a kid, and you would always flip a page and there'd be some reference, and then there'd be like a little yellow box that would have an asterisk, and it would be like, see Incredible Hulk number 184 for explanation. And that would always kind of make the world bigger and more interesting. But I also think about that in terms of, like, I don't know, like I had a long kind of dialogue on Blue Sky a while back about how it feels like I haven't read enough to be able to understand all of these conversations, how it's hard. You mentioned Scalzi, and I just read, like, in the last 2 months, The Forever War, and felt like, oh, I should have probably read this 20 years ago, like to get in on this.
I told you, Erik, you activate me, I will build you a curriculum. I have the resources. I will make it so.
Also, books don't have an expiration date. I mean, okay, some books definitely have an expiration date. But
I mean, you did bring up Heinlein, so.
The book is not going to not be there when you go back to read it. And I find, and sometimes that book, when you go back and read it, you kind of have to read it through a different lens, because if you go back and read the early cyberpunk novels now, right, you're going to be like, oh, well, what's so innovative about this? And then you look at the publication date, and it's 1983. You're like, oh, okay. Like, this is the thing that everybody has been copying. And you can even trace some of those lineages back even further into the 1970s and late 1960s with new wave authors and authors like John Brunner, and even further back to, like, Frederick Pohl was doing some cyberpunky stuff as far back as I think the 1930s. And that lineage just kind of keeps on keeping on, right? So you don't have to have gone back and read. You don't have to have all of that context, but once you have it, it can make the experience a little bit richer. And I think for me, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think of it like if you ever find an old family album and you're flipping through it and you see someone's picture and you're like, oh, wait, my sibling has that nose, right? Like, it's not like you didn't know the shape of the sibling face before that, but all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, here's this connection through time to this whole other thing, which also makes me think of the Virginia Woolf song by Indigo Girls and, like, all the other pieces that, that people have been trying to find connection, whether that's in person in the moment or also through time. And that's the coolest part about the books. Like you just said, they're still there. So even though that
Yeah.
person is gone, their voice is still available to us.
Yeah. And one of the things that I find really interesting, and I've talked uh, with some of the other uh, female identifying writers writing specifically like space opera right now, Kate Elliott and Ann Leckie and Arkady Martine in particular, um, is often we all seem to find our work compared with uh, things like Heinlein and sort of universally finding that kind of funny because really I think all of us are in many ways like the daughters of Octavia Butler and C.J. Cherryh more
Yes.
than um, and Joe Clayton and a bunch of other writers who aren't as well remembered now. But the uh, Octavia Butler's Xenogenesis books, which are now I think the trilogy has been rebranded as Lilith's Brood, but they
In my
were
heart, they'll always be Xenogenesis.
yes. um, which you see that lineage running through everything up through like Ruth Anna Emrys now and what she's writing, and you see C.J. Cherryh reflected in what Ann Leckie is doing, um, and so and in Kate Elliott's Unconquerable Sun books, and Arkady Martine's political space opera,
Well,
and
and isn't Kate's a retelling of Alexander the Great
kind of, yeah, I
ish?
mean, ish, inspired by,
Yes.
yeah. I don't know. I don't think book 3 is out yet, so I don't know if there's going to be a. um, we'll find out. But yeah, it's definitely you know queers having space battles. She's doing a very interesting thing in those books where she's got these different they they are different from many military science fiction novels in that she is exploring the conflict from so many different perspectives and so many different political angles.
Yeah, there's no one
Um,
hero.
yeah, and like there are the good guys aren't necessarily 100%, good guys. There's some moral ambiguity going on, which is kind of like life, really. Um, things are often much simpler in fiction than they are in reality.
That makes me think of your own recent science fiction. I don't know if you'd consider it space opera or not, but your White Space series with Ancestral Night. And I know at least one of my friends went after I recommended it and he read it, is like, oh my God, tell me there's going to be more. And I just read the second one, which was fantastic. No, was it the third? Folded Sky?
Yeah,
Yes.
Folded Sky is the third one.
Yeah.
Machine is the second one, which
Yes, yes,
is
yes.
that's sort of got some James White DNA in it from the wonderful pacifist hospital station short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, no, the definitely. I mean, they're space opera adjacent. I'm happy to call them space opera. Uh, it's a broad tent, you know,
Well,
and
I personally, just to fangirl for a millisecond, is you're grappling with what is sentience, given all the conversations about AI these days. Like you
mhm,
saying, all right, if they're people, let's treat them like people.
yeah,
Or at least
yeah,
explore
exactly.
what happens if you don't treat them like people.
hmm And I mean, AI is such a useful. I'm gonna have to say, artificial general intelligence is such a useful set of metaphors, uh, even if it never comes to fruition in the real world, which it very well may not. But it also allows us to kind of play with the superhuman card, and also play some changes on tropes of like the super powerful um supernatural servant of the sort of genie,
Mm.
Aladdin, uh but also all of those questions of uh self-determination, right? And if you have created an intelligent, but it also lets us talk about what parents owe their children, right? If you have created an intelligence, even if it is a non-human intelligence, it is in some very real respect your child, um, and treating it like an object then becomes really problematic. And yeah, um, so I like to explore those ethics by, you know, giving those characters a voice and a subject position. Um, when I feel like often in science fiction, AIs have been treated as sort of I don't know, convenient servants or uh, bugbears, and obviously not exclusively. Uh, but the more nuance and the more complexity you can bring to that conversation, and the conversation around what memory is, and what neurologic function is, and this is something I've been playing with since my first published novel. um, and it's always very interesting to me because it's so malleable.
I and it's that malleability that I think is what makes stories like endure and become and stay relevant and interesting, is because it's not like a simple answer.
Yeah.
Nuance and complexity and ethical dilemmas are not
Hmm.
meant to be solved in 80,000 or 100,000 word novel. Like you don't just like hit end and then they're like, I just finished the final argument on what is sentience. Submit. Like like that's not how humanity works. And so I think that's one of the things that like the contrast between the way that writers approach AI or AGI,
Hmm.
artificial general intelligence, and the way that like large language models seem to be approaching it in the real world is that the large language models seem to have like an end point for their calculations. Like they're anticipating, like it's the the autocomplete machine, and that implies completion. And so as far as like the LLMs are concerned, there is a closed loop, there is a final answer. You
Hmm.
can ask Grok or Claude or Phil or whatever names that they give these AI chatbots, and just be like, what is a person, and what is the nature of thought and memory, and it will just give you a clear answer. And it'll be like, it reminds me a little bit of what I think is an enduring joke, which is that question that gets asked in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like, what is the nature of all of this? And it's just like, I'm going to give you an answer. It's not going to make any sense.
Hmm.
Because these are not supposed to be answered things.
Yeah.
And it's in that nuance and the iterating and the debate, that seems like it seems like that's the community, that's the conversation, that's how you see that like lineage of authors and conversation. It's
Yeah.
not that they're finishing the other author's sentence, it's that they're yes-anding the other
Hmm.
author's idea.
Yeah. Yes, and or no, but, or
Right.
yes and no, but. Um,
Maybe also.
maybe also, have you considered? Uh, Let me take this in another direction. Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely. Where do you get your ideas? Well, I wanted to argue with something, or I didn't know the answer to a question and I wanted to argue with myself about it.
Yeah, that really resonates. Like like every once in a while you'll see like a reader or even another author will be like, "What did you mean by this?" And I'll be like, "I'm like when I'm thinking about my creative process, I'll be like, I meant 7 things, and depending upon when you ask me and the mood that I am in,
Yep.
one of those 7 maybe is slightly more relevant than the others. But the reality is that it was like 7 different opinions stuffed into a particular piece of writing.
Yeah, it's an argument. It's why we call it a thematic argument,
Right, right.
because it's an argument. And the characters having their arguments, you can always kind of tell when something is a little pedantic, or like when the author has an axe they want to grind. And in some cases, like there are certain axes that I am going to grind.
Sure.
I am always going to create worlds that are populated by diverse casts of people, because that is the world I see. And apparently that's a political statement these days, but that's a political statement I am perfectly comfortable making in an unequivocal fashion. Um, but on the other hand, if we're talking about, well, what level of hacking your own neurochemistry, or socially intervening in somebody's neurochemistry, is, like, where is the dystopia line there? Like, that's a movable feast,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, because, okay, yes, we can all sit with Huxley and Orwell and say mind control is bad. Um, Fine, perfect. Also, I take an anti-anxiety drug.
Yeah, I mean, I'm diabetic, and my mood will
Yeah.
just change based upon whether or not I've had a sandwich recently, and
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
it's not as straightforward as
Eating a sandwich is hacking your neurochemistry.
I mean, it 100% is. Went for a walk, hacked my neurochemistry.
Yep.
My day job is in healthcare, and people like to pretend that the self and the brain is somehow disconnected from the meat suit. You guys, it's all together.
Absolutely. I back at like 20 years ago now. Speaking of LiveJournal, I wrote this, what I referred to at the time as a feminist critique of the singularity, because that was during the time period in science fiction. God, it must have been almost 25 years ago now. During the time period in science fiction where everybody was like, "Oh, you have to consider the singularity. You can't write science fiction without considering the singularity. We're all going to be uploaded brains." And I'm like, guys, we're this is the same Apollonian bullshit. I think Charlie Strauss called it the rapture of the nerds. Um, uh, Go Charlie. Uh, of course you can consider futures in which we're not uploading our brains. Like, how are you gonna? The meat is your brain. The thing that does the processing is the meat. The idea that you are somehow separated from your meat suit, I don't know. Anybody who has ever taken a mind altering substance, even one as simple and readily available as alcohol or tobacco,
Right.
should be pretty aware that the meat has a lot of effect on cognition.
I'm trying to think, is that argument even ongoing? Are people still having that debate, or did they just kind of go, well, we can't really resolve that one?
I
Like,
Yeah, no, it was everything. They're fads, right?
sure, it'll come back in
It'll
a
come
few
back.
years.
So, like right now, I think everybody is arguing about whether or not. Um, I think right now all of the moral outrage is focused on romanticy, and whatever. Take your moral out. You're gonna have moral outrage about something, I'm sure. Let people read their nice shifter romances. Just there's
I I bring this up every once in a while when I'm talking to authors because it's so fascinating to me, and it says so much about readers and writers. I had a writing mentor at one point that announced, we were at like a social gathering after a workshop, and he announced to the workshop class, he just sort of he was very thoughtful about it, and he said, readers come to writing, to stories, for crisis. They want to read a story that brings them to a point of like conflict and ethical, like breaking. And he's like, that's what people want stories for. And I remember even at the time thinking, no, a lot of people want like a cozy mystery, or a lot of people want to just watch the same sitcom they've seen 150 times again because it's a comfort level. And so I think about that. I think about like, do you think that there is anything so simple that readers go to a story for, as readers go to story for crisis?
I mean, that assumes that there is a spherical reader of uniform density.
The physics of readership.
So presuming the spherical reader of uniform density, frictionless spherical reader of uniform density, have you ever met one of those? Because no, I don't think that there's anything that you can say, oh, all readers come to fiction for this. Some readers come to fiction to be surprised. Some come to be comforted. Some come to be comforted and surprised. Some come for catharsis. Some come for to have their preconceptions challenged. Some come to have their preconceptions validated. And so one of the most prevalent modes of fiction in the Western world, which is all I'm really qualified to talk about, for the last 450 years, grows out of the Elizabethan Jacobean revenge tragedy, where we have this, which gives us both modern horror as morality tale, right? There's a straight line from the Revenger's tragedy to Friday the 13th, but it also gives us the modern murder mystery, which is also a morality tale, and both of them get their emotional effect, create their satisfaction in the reader by presuming that in the end there will be some kind of justice. There will be some sort of reset to the mean. And then you have, and that's was like the innovation of cosmic horror, right? Because there is no reset to the mean. You get to the end of the cosmic horror story, and things are still horrible. Yeah. And that's one of the interesting differences between like the techno thriller and science fiction. In the techno thriller, you get to the end of your Michael Crichton novel, and the genie goes back in the bottle. You get to the end of your Greg Bear novel, and that genie is hell and gone. That is never going back to the bottle. There's no social reset. The universe has been tested to destruction, and something new is going to happen now.
Do you find yourself drawn in your own writing versus your own reading, and these could be different, to one versus the other?
I kind of like to. Well, I mean, I have a real tendency to sort of shoehorn thriller or mystery plots into science fiction and fantasy novels. And that's one of the great things about science fiction and fantasy, is that because they are a genre that is largely predicated upon setting and this idea of in science fiction the novum, or in fantasy the noumena, the speculative element, the thing. Sorry, I should stop waving my hands in front of the camera.
No, it'll make me look less ridiculous when I'm doing it later.
The so you have this concept of the novum or the noumena, or whatever your speculative element is, your disconnect to the thing in the horror novel where there's no going back, right? It's like the horrible thing has happened. So in a mystery, and that not always, because specifically a whole bunch of like the Scandinavian more literary Scandinavian mysteries, and people like Tara French, who is Irish, I think, and even the early or Silence of the Lambs was another example of this, although that franchise went other places. The genie doesn't quite go back in the bottle at the end of the mystery. However, there's some horrific consequence of everything, of all the darkness that has happened, and but that's also kind of like the noir aspect of things. I don't know. I've just chased myself in a complete circle here. So what I'm trying to say is that I like to play with doing sort of half and half, like having a mystery plot that can be resolved in some sort of fashion that gives closure, and then having a science fiction plot that opens up, because I like the tension between conflicting elements. Like I'm always looking for things that are sort of orthogonal to one another and are in tension with one another. So they're pulling away or pushing each other, because I feel like that's where a lot of the juice in a story comes from for me.
What's the last thing you read that you really think that Erik and I should read?
Oh, okay. I read not too long ago John Chu's debut novel, which is coming out in April. It's absolutely a delight. It's
Wait, what's it called?
It's called The Subtle Art of Folding Space. Okay. So apparently it's all books about folding things, top to bottom here. And it is about the universe gnomes. It's about quantum mechanics, as in the people who keep the universe running, like mechanics. Yeah. Anyway, he doesn't actually make that pun in the book, but I like slapped my forehead when I figured it out. It's delightful. It's funny. It's a family drama. It's a caper. There's just all of this. It's a little bit madcap. The dialogue is bouncy and delightful, as you would expect from a John Chu story. I'm also, and I have to look up the title, I'm halfway through Premu Mohammed's Wick Hills, which is also not quite out yet. And that is a new weird spy thriller fantasy that, if you dig like John le Carré, it is the overlap of the Venn diagram between China Miéville and John le Carré.
Perfect. I think both of those are on my to read list when they are released.
Yeah.
Definitely excited about John Chu's book. I've been watching like the cover and the various announcements and the slow march of publicity leading towards the release date. I'm very excited about that.
It's delightful.
So speaking of the different kinds of ways we, technology and stuff came up earlier. We have so many ways to read books now. Obviously, there's the hard copies, but we have ebooks, audiobooks, books being adapted. I'm thinking about Project Hail Mary right now, and how reading the book for me was very different than listening to the book, which I'm anticipating will be different than watching the story. Do you find you have a strong preference for one ingestion of story method or the other, and does it change the story for you, or are you more fluid than that?
I'm pretty fluid. I am very grateful right now for ebooks, as an unpleasant side effect of medication that I'm on is that it has given me cataracts.
Oh
So
gosh.
I'm going to have cataract surgery this year. Very exciting. Uh, but ebooks, you can make the print big and you can make
Yeah.
it bright, because reading paper books right now is really difficult for me. Um, but electronically, no problems at all. Uh, and I'm looking forward to uh, after the surgery being able to go back to, because I have a stack of paper books that I've been just like bouncing off of because it's too physically difficult. Audiobooks I love for uh, driving, for doing housework, for doing yard work, that sort of thing. Um, when you like physically, you need your eyes for something else, but you still want a little bit of a story. My problem is always that I'm sort of torn between audiobooks, music, and podcasts. I need to be data so I can have 4 or 5 inputs going at
Multiple
once.
streams. Uh-huh.
Multiple streams, yeah.
I found recently that my inner editorial critic comes out much more strongly when I'm reading the book, like the physical book or the ebook, than when I'm listening to an audiobook. So I am much more patient with like the opening chapters that I might bounce off of if I was reading a paper book. But for whatever reason, the audiobook, like my inner like whatever doesn't get as loud. And so I will often start books listening to them in an audio format, and then I will switch to reading them once I've gotten past the threshold. So I wonder if you have a different critical engagement. Like I find it hard not to be like very specifically paying attention to the line, you know.
I am very picky about prose, and I am even pickier about prose in an audiobook because I can't
Okay.
skim. So if I find myself like, if it's just sort of bogging down, or the like, I might flip in a paper book, I might flip a couple of pages. And also I get this in ebooks because it's harder to just flip a couple of pages, right? It's harder to skip ahead in an ebook. So I am less tolerant of boring bits or flabby prose in audiobooks or ebooks. But I've spent too much time developing my editorial faculty and thereby rendered myself incapable of enjoying anything ever again.
Do you have that problem where you interact with all media as an editor to whether or not you can suppress it maybe, but like naturally
Yeah.
Same.
If I am enjoying something so much that my editorial brain turns off, that's
That's a hell of a
delightful.
work, yeah.
High
That's
bar.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, like that, and that. But that's also the stuff I look for, because then I can just relax and enjoy it, or in some cases, be very tense and enjoy it.
So Celia mentioned that I've met you through various like literary things, but I think I first met you through Viable Paradise, the workshop, the residential 1 week workshop on Martha's Vineyard, and I think like one of the things that strikes me about Viable Paradise, and this is me being a fan, but like of a very specific, like experience, which is that like that sense of a community of like the communication and back and forth. That's what Viable Paradise gave me with my cohort of the 24 people that are the 23 other people and myself that went to Viable Paradise together. We remain in contact and we bounce things off of each other. We're each other's first beta readers. We're various people, and therefore we kind of we have evolved. I think we are all evolving together, in many ways. I'm wondering, as you must have multiple rounds of that. Like you must have multiple experiences of having like a 20-person or so on cohort.
Like a cohort.
Yeah, that like Sil mentioned, like becoming familiar with you through Live Journal, and I know that there are a lot of authors that connected on Live Journal and had a community there, and that wasn't something I was a part of. So I'm kind of curious what your experience is with that like cohorting situation.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of central focus of the cohort that I came in with between about 2001 and 2004. A lot of it was the old Del Rey online writing workshop,
Okay.
which is where I initially met a whole bunch of those people, including C.L. Polk and Karen Loichi and C.C. Finley, and so like that group of people have remained, good friends of mine through the development of our collegial relations, and so have a whole bunch of the people from LiveJournal, like Sarah Monette, who you mentioned earlier, and Charlie Strauss, who I mentioned earlier, and Sarah Monette is also Catherine Addison, for those who don't know. So those relationships that you build become so structural to your career over time that it's almost like a tapestry, and you have to have a lot of theory of mind because everybody has all of these relationships. It's not just like my relationship with a given person, a spherical author of uniform density, frictionless spherical author of uniform density. We'll call him Max Gladstone. When I first encountered Max, he was I think like 25-year-old wonderkind who had just sold the first craft sequence novel, and I was asked to blurb it. And then we wound up going on a book tour together because we were both tour authors at the time. And then he came to be an instructor at Viable Paradise. And, we're regionally close to one another, so we do book events together, and we see each other at conventions, and that's how that friendship builds over time, right? And then after you've known the person for a while, and if it's not creepy, you just like go out to dinner to hang because they're a friend now. And those relationships, when that weave through each other, we talk about. People talk about networking. You got to go to conventions and network. You've got to got to get into a workshop and network. There is this idea that, quote, networking, unquote, is somehow different from making friends and sustaining relationships. and it's not. But it also winds up that one of the big pieces of advice that I wind up giving many of my students when they're like, well, how do I get through the querying process? How do I connect with editors and agents? And I'm like, well, you have to go out and make friends. And you can do it online. You can do it through, various fan spaces, Discords, online communities. You can do it by hanging in the bar at a convention if you can afford to go to one, or if there's one that's local to you that's inexpensive. And making those connections makes you part of this larger community, and really, I mean, the friends that I made when I was an apprentice writer who was trying to learn my trade and trying to break in and trying to sell a novel, sell short stories and find an agent and find a novel. Find a novel. Yeah, they're under rocks. You just
just hidden
you know.
between
It was in
the
your
couch
brain. You
cushions.
just
Yeah.
had to dig.
Yeah.
Just had to dig. Oh, with a grapefruit spoon. It feels like sometimes anyway. So, but those connections and that community that I found at that point in time is absolutely a lifesaver, right? Um, and in some cases, quite literally, But also, they're people who can be your sanity check. You mentioned they can be your beta readers. They can be your moral support. They can, take you out and buy you a pizza when your book has just been rejected for the 375th time. And you need that. Uh, and when I say you here, I mean me. But I think most people need that. Need connection, need community.
Well, and it strikes me that so much of the history of science fiction and fantasy has been the history of communities finding each other. Like conventions and fan gatherings and letter columns and magazine fandoms. It's all
Sure.
like way back from like I think maybe I don't know if it's uniquely in the science fiction and fantasy, but certainly it is a big part of science fiction and fantasy as I've experienced it. Is
Right.
that like. I read this book I'm excited about. Let me tell you about it. I had this experience that I have some questions about. Why don't we discuss it? I'm debating the nature of sentience right now. Let's go into conversation about it.
Let's go have a And the thing about community is that it is both protective in some ways, like if and in that we ideally we look out for each other. There are ways that can be less than helpful, obviously, because there are like people would be like, oh, my good friend would never do something awful. And sometimes your good friend has done something awful and you just have to deal with it. But I think overwhelmingly the community and the network of people is a good thing. And it's like a big family, honestly. There's that toxic uncle, and the holidays are hell, but also there's a lot of good there.
Yeah.
Erik, I'm just thinking when you're thinking about, or when you just said, like, let's debate the nature of sentience, or I was just reading this, have you read that? Aside from karaoke, that's the core of how we met, is I get around people who like books, and so I just don't want to stop talking about them, and then all of a sudden I'm in a group of authors and they're asking what I write, and I'm like, oh no, I'm your target audience. Like, I'm your target market. Please, I would love to read whatever you're writing.
One of the funniest things I have ever seen, my friend Michael Curry, who's an agent with DMLA, we were sitting around a table, and somebody was introducing themselves. I don't remember who it was, and they were, and I introduced myself and I was like, oh yeah, I'm a writer. And somebody sitting next to me was like, oh yeah, I'm a writer. And the person looked over at Michael and said, and what do you write? And Michael said, oh God, no. I'm not one of those.
One of those.
Don't lump me in with those weirdos. Or it could have just been like The Contract. That's what I write.
Yes.
I write the legal documents.
I write the
so
emails.
that they manifest into the world.
The endless emails. There's so many emails.
Sil, do we have any final questions on our list? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
I think we did too. I'm so grateful, Bear, that you were willing to come onto our little nascent apprentice podcast ourselves. We're just so excited to talk stories with people and nerd out. And I love that you're able to join us, and I will never be able to get the frictionless spherical reader of uniform density out of my head.
And you could go bowling with them.
And that is an unexpected advantage of that. Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. Well,
thank you so much.
Oh, you owe me a code.
I'm gonna stop recording. You've been listening to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik. Thanks. Please connect with us on social media. We're Connect the Plots Pod on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. You can also support us and gain access to exclusive content on our Patreon. That's at patreon.com/connecttheplotspod, all spelled out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.